#1 best-selling book on the New York Times bestseller list. We are thankful he's joining us via Skype today. AJ Finn, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks so much for welcoming me today.
Thank you so much. The Woman in the Window has received critical acclaim, and people are super excited about this thriller. So this is your debut novel. Not everyone hits a home run on their first try. So #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's hit in the top 10 on the Amazon list. Talk to us about how you're feeling.
It's not unlike being punched or kicked in the stomach. I feel sort of disembodied, and I know that in a nanosecond I'll feel something incredible. I'll register a particular sensation, but it hasn't quite hit me yet.
Well, it's very exciting. People can't wait to get their hands on this book. And like I said, it's done all right. So The Woman in the Window has rave reviews and already available in 36 languages and soon to be a major film from Fox. So we'll get to that point a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about your time spent in the thriller genre and suspense genre. You've immersed yourself in this. You've studied it, you've worked in the publishing forum for quite some time. Do you really feel like because of the success, you've figured out the key to what readers want?
Well, let's take it in two parts. In the first place, I grew up gorging myself on Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, and then as a teenager, I got into the genre which we now term psychological suspense, as pioneered by Patricia Highsmith and Ruth Rendell in the 50s and 60s. And then as a doctoral student at Oxford, I focused on crime fiction before launching a career in publishing, focusing once again on crime fiction. That said, what I've learned in my 10 plus years in publishing is that it's best not to fake or force a novel. Now, there's nothing wrong with it empirically, and I've published plenty of novels that were basically written on commission. But the secret sauce, if you will, is to feel sincerely invested in what you're writing. It ideally would be as organic as it can be. So I think that's the silver bullet.
Interesting, and I think readers do appreciate that.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the main character, Anna Fox. As you develop this story, talk to us about her as a protagonist. Talk to us about how you developed her.
So when I was 21 years old and a senior at Duke, I was diagnosed with severe clinical depression. And for the next 15 years, I resorted to pretty much every treatment imaginable in combating it, from medication to meditation, from hypnotherapy to talk therapy, and nothing proved particularly fruitful. And then in 2015, my diagnosis was adjusted. A psychiatrist whom I consulted suggested I, in fact, suffered from a form of bipolar disorder. And so we tried a new medication, and I've done this before, cycled through various meds, and I always feel like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk again. It's not a pleasant experience. But midway through this particular transition, it appeared that the diagnosis was finally correct. And one night, whilst parked on my sofa, trying to come to grips with this new medical regimen, I was watching Rear Window. I've got this yen for old movies, and I can watch them over and over, just as I can reread beloved books time and again. And as I'm watching the film, I clock a light in my peripheral vision, and I look across the street in my from my Manhattan apartment, and it's my neighbor. She's switched on her living room lamp, and she's settling herself in her chair, aiming a remote on the TV. I know all this because, in accordance with fine Manhattan custom, I'm watching her. And I think to myself, how funny is this, that on TV in 1954, Jimmy Stewart is peering into Raymond Burr's apartment across the courtyard, and I'm doing the exact same thing 60 years later. So in developing the plot of The Woman in the Window, I did draw on antecedents in film noir and suspense storytelling. The character of Anna, though, has a more personal provenance. She struggles with mental health issues, as I have done my entire adulthood. Although the circumstances of our respective traumas are very different, they feel to me somewhat comparable in intensity. I was very keen to create a character who is not helpless. So often in this genre, the female characters, even and often especially those in starring roles, are what the British call wet. They orbit men, they rely upon men, they fret about men, and in my experience, this isn't very realistic. Most women I know are at least a match for the men in their lives, if not more so. And I'll say this for Anna, although she's a mess and a mess of her own making, she identifies an inquiry, pursues an investigation, tests her limits, all without the help of a man, or indeed without the help of anyone. So that was one of my objectives with this character, and the other was to endow her with some hobbies and habits so as to help her feel more credible and lived in. It seems to me that so often in so-called genre fiction, characters seem to exist solely to serve the narrative. You get the sense that if these particular circumstances hadn't befallen them, they wouldn't exist at all. So in the novel, Anna has hobbies. She learns French, she plays chess, she watches old films, none of which are integral to the plot. My hope is that they just lend her depth and dimension.
Definitely. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the character herself now? You kind of were talking there about how she is a strong woman, and we are giving her this character, and while she is quote-unquote a mess,
Yep.
she's strong in her own sense. I've heard you talk about this in interviews before, is that you describe her as a woman because she is a character in her
Yep.
40s, so calling her a girl would not, it just wouldn't be accurate. You come from a background in the publishing world, and there are books, especially in the titles, that they use the term girl.
Yep.
I was really interested, as you've talked about this before, but talk to us about how you describe her as a woman, and you chose to use the word woman in the title. Talk to me about, do you find that empowering, and do you think that this will be more of a trend as we move forward, come in 2018 and beyond?
I wouldn't want to describe it as empowering simply because I don't think women should feel empowered that someone is referring to them or addressing them appropriately. If you are 18 years old or older and you are female, you are legally and in most cases biologically a woman.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great thing to be. You're a grown-up. Not every book with girl in the title is cynically cashing in on the trend. The original Girl, Gone Girl, is a title that to me bristles with irony because that book is about the way that men reduce and taxonomize and fetishize women. And certainly not every girl book since then is making a direct play for the consumer. That said, far too many are. I'm not a woman. I don't understand why many female readers, not all by any stretch, but many, don't mind being talked down to, as I see. If I were to pick up a book with boy in the title and it was in reference to a guy in his 30s, I'd feel spoken down to. I'd feel infantilized and reduced. I think women deserve better.
I think it was super interesting that you make that point, and that a lot of thought actually went into the title. Can you talk to us about developing the title and what you put on the jacket, as you call it?
I very much wanted to avoid a girl title. A, so as to avoid the appearance of bandwagoning, but B, more importantly, because as discussed, I don't think it's appropriate to refer to grown women as girls. Again, it's reductive. Again, it's infantilizing. So I knew I wanted the word woman in the title, and as it happens, there is a 1944 Fritz Lang noir called The Woman in the Window. I liked the consonants of that title. I thought it was evocative. I like, too, that the title has two solid words, woman, window, everyone knows what they mean, and yet it's also a bit of a slippery title. We're not sure which woman it's referring to, or indeed which window.
I do find it very interesting, very intriguing as well.
Oh, good. Good.
I think a lot of other people do, so you know where it stands
Good.
on the bestsellers list. Talk to us a little bit about your work in the publishing world. It's my understanding that you've had the opportunity to work with several well-known and some of the best in the business.
Yes, over the course of my career, I've been lucky enough to publish or to supervise the programs of everyone from J.K. Rowling writing as Robert Galbraith to Patricia Cornwell, from Karen Slaughter to Sarah Paretsky to Agatha Christie. And what I've learned from these authors, not so much from Agatha Christie because she's long dead, but from those among the living, is that writing is a job. And when approached by young writers or aspiring writers or those starting out for advice, I remind them that A, they must read, because by reading you expose yourself to different ideas, perspectives, tricks, narrative notions. And secondly, and probably more importantly, it is work. It is not fun all the time. What job is fun all the time? So that's what my authors have imparted to me.
It's pretty amazing that you have been able to be surrounded by all these authors. You've also studied this genre for much time. You've also, definitely dug into this. I found that you started this book in 2015 and you had that beginning, middle, and end before you even started writing it. When you were working on this, and because you've really immersed yourself in this genre, did you feel any pressure to make something good?
Yes, most definitely. I quite like that question. I did feel pressure to make something good, not least because, in addition to working in publishing, in addition to now writing books, I read voraciously. Nothing guts me more than a disappointing novel, particularly those that don't quite stick the landing, and that was a trick I was especially determined to pull off. I wanted it to be more substantive than your average thriller. I wanted to write a novel with more in its head and in its heart than so many of the books we read today. I don't know that I've succeeded, but I absolutely had ambitions beyond a bestseller.
And how do you feel now that it's done? You've gone through this process that you've witnessed so many others go through, that you've
Yes.
helped so many others go through. How are you feeling now that you've gone through it yourself and may or may not have lived up to what you set your standards to?
I've got two responses to that. The first is, whilst I have worked with some of the biggest writers in the business, this is a publication on a scale I've rarely seen before, particularly for a debut. We're being published in 36 languages. There's a big film in the works. We've hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and I think the last time a debut title managed that was in 2006, all of which is testament to my publishers and agents. I give them all credit. That said, and this is my second point, the process has actually made me somewhat less sympathetic to authors than I would have been otherwise, which is not what I'd anticipated. The fact is, I've got a team of experts in my corner, and it's probably not my place to argue with them when they have particular views on the jacket or the marketing, which isn't to say I should just roll over, but they know best. And certainly in my publishing career, I found myself occasionally frustrated with authors who, beyond a certain point, would continue to argue with me. I'd sort of want to point out to them that I do know what I'm doing, as do my colleagues, and I'd love for them to trust me on this. Doesn't mean I was always right. In fact, I was frequently wrong. But to be able to rely upon an entire squad of pros is kind of a luxury. And I didn't want to be one of those authors who takes it for granted or indeed works against it.
I think valid point there. You did mention the movie. And
Yes.
so movie rights for The Woman in the Window were acquired by Fox. So talk to us a little bit about that, and will you be making a cameo, do you think?
So the film rights were actually preempted by Fox before we sold any of the publishing rights. I was in LAX returning from holiday when my agent rang, and she said, well, we've said to Hollywood we don't want to entertain any overtures right now. We'd like to close some publishing deals first, but Fox won't go away, and they've tendered an offer. And it's what we call an exploding offer, meaning you need to accept or reject it right now on the phone. And I said, oh gosh, all right, what is it? And she said, well, it's $1 million. Do you want it? And I thought, yeah, if I must. It was, it didn't require much deliberation. So right then and there, we'd sold the film rights, and I wanted to tell someone, but there was no one in the terminal with me aside from this lovely Japanese family, a father, a mother, and a child. I didn't know if they spoke English. They were speaking Japanese, and I don't speak that language. So I just turned to them and gave them a thumbs up and smiled, and Molly, bless them, they all smiled at me and gave me thumbs ups in return. It was very sweet. And we haven't kept in touch, but that was quite special for me. So the film is being produced by Scott Rudin, who won an Oscar for No Country for Old Men and also made The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Social Network, Clueless, great films. And the script is being written by Tracy Letts, the playwright who won a Pulitzer for August Osage County. So between the two of them, plus Fox, the studio, I feel I'm in very good hands. I don't feel remotely precious or proprietary about the book. They can probably only improve it. As for a cameo, I'd love one, but most of the action takes place in a single house. There aren't too many characters, so we'd have to get pretty creative in order to shoehorn me into the action.
You never know. Hollywood has a way of making things work out, right? Maybe be like a pizza delivery, something like that.
That's an excellent idea.
See?
I like that. I'd steal that if you don't mind.
Work you right in.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. Do you have any information on that? If it might be in the works already?
It is in the works already. The script is in development. It's due quite soon, actually. I had breakfast with the producer a couple months ago. He was lovely. Fox flew to New York in June to host a dinner for me. They flew me out in October to meet their team. They wrapped things up, and once the script is finished, they'll set a director and then cast the lead.
Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Yep.
So
It
things are happening quickly. So
Yeah.
as we wrap up, because I know you have much to do, if people are either have just finished this book, The Woman in the Window, or are quickly downloading it on their e-readers, are listening to it on audio, or are grabbing it from their favorite local bookstore, what do you hope people take away from The Woman in the Window?
What I said earlier about trying to write a book with more on its mind and in its heart than your average thriller holds true. I would like readers to enjoy the twists and turns of the story, the reversals and about faces. I'd also like to I'd like them to close the book feeling emotionally satisfied, feeling that they've read something of substance. I'd like them to think about anything from mental health to the debilitating power of loneliness, particularly in an urban environment, to the way the internet and digital technologies seem to both connect us and drive us apart from one another. And if they don't take any of that away, that's fine. If nothing else, I hope that they've enjoyed the thriller aspect of the book. But if they find it rewarding beyond that, if they get out of my book what I get out of the books of Gillian Flynn and Tana French and Kate Atkinson, I'd be enormously gratified.
Yeah, that sounds pretty neat.
Yeah.
And before we let you go, are you working on anything else next? Because I feel like people are going to want a lot more from you as a reader.
Fingers crossed. Yes, I am working on another psychological thriller. This one's set in San Francisco.
Very exciting. Well, we can't wait to get that one next. I know a lot of people are anxiously awaiting the next one. If they've already read this one, then they want more. So
Good. Like to hear it.
Congratulations once again, author
Thanks.
AJ Finn. We appreciate your time here on Go Local Live, and the book is The Woman in the Window. Please hang tight as we get ready for our next guest on Go Local Live.